Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the creative world. My name is Ryan, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a quick and dirty editing breakdown of the following image. I started off by cleaning up my seamless backdrop. I first selected all the objects that I wanted to remove and used the Content Aware Fill tool to remove everything. Next, I used the Liquify tool to fix some of the armor that was coming off of the shirt. I then smoothed out some of the folds on the clothing, as well as evening out the subject's silhouette. I then used the Select Subject tool, as well as the Select and Mask Refine tools to cut my subject out from the background. Alright, so for the 3D portion, I'm going to give you guys a quick rundown, or rather a breakdown of my scene. So here I am in my camera view, and this is just with my background image as a placeholder so I know where to put all of my 3D objects in relation to my photograph. Now here, as you can see, my scene is fairly simple. It consists of 3 lights, light 1, light 2, which is fairly dim, and light 3, which is much brighter. I'm just gonna toggle that render view off, and as you can see here, as far as my objects goes, again, it looks pretty complex, but it is very simple. So I have here my pipes that I made from scratch, and then everything else, the weapons and the helmet, are made from various kit bash assets that I found online, both paid for and free. If I break this down here, you will see that it is made up of a bunch of tiny little parts that I kind of imported and placed together, positioned them around until I got the basic shape that I want. So as far as the helmet goes, I started off with just one piece and used that as the focal point for my helmet. And then from there, I just kept adding on piece by piece, bit by bit, until I came up with a shape that I was pretty happy with. Once I put all objects in my scene and placed it in an area of where I liked it, I went on to texturing my image. As far as my texturing goes, all I did was I placed a simple basic metal texture on all of my objects. It's the exact same texture on each piece, nothing special here. After texturing my object, I then placed all of my lights in the scene one by one until I was able to match the same lighting that my subject was photographed with. And those are the 3 overall elements that you need for your scene. You need the objects, you need a proper material for your objects, and then you need proper lighting. Once I was finished with everything, I simply rendered out the 3D portions of my image with an alpha mask so I can drag and drop them right into my image. Once I have brought it into my Photoshop document, I then began to position it around until it fit onto my subject. You will notice that I have created my 3D render with separate light passes. This means each light is on its own layer so I can easily control the spillage and brightness of that layer. This is crucial for creating a more realistic composite. Next, I used a simple levels adjustment layer to darken my entire image. I then inverted the layer mask and then selectively painted back in wherever the 3D object would be casting shadows onto my subject. Next, I used a custom action that creates 2 curve layers to dodge and burn my subject. At this point, I have done all the subject retouching to my image, and now I'm going to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing by adding some stylized elements. In this case, behind my subject, I used the rectangular marquee tool to create some diagonal beams of light behind my subject. I duplicated these beams at various different widths and just placed them wherever in my composition that I thought it looked interesting. To add a little bit more visual interest, I duplicated all of those light beam layers, set the blending mode to linear dodge, and blurred them a little bit. I then added a hue and saturation adjustment to each one of those light beams to add in a little bit of color. On a new layer on top of all of my other layers, I set the blending mode to screen, and then I used the gradient tool and a large soft round brush tool to paint in little bits of light bloom that would come from those background light beams splashing over my subject in various different areas. Whenever you have a very bright source of light behind your subject in a composite, this is a key step that helps tie everything together. For sharpening, I merged all visible layers into a new layer on top by pressing Ctrl, Alt, Shift, and pressing E. I then changed the blending mode of that layer to overlay, and then went up to Filter, Other, and then High Pass Filter, and then I selected a value that yielded the sharpening that I liked. Next, I moved on to adding some stylized chromatic aberration. I did this by again merging all visible layers into a new layer on top. I then double-clicked that layer to bring up the blending mode options, and then I unchecked one of the color channels. Next, I added a radial blur to that image with the center point on my subject's head. I used a very small value so the effect wasn't too strong, but strong enough just to add a little bit of visual interest. Next, I added in some various different lens flare elements as well as some particles to help create a sense of atmosphere in my image. To finish off the color grading of my image, I merged all visible layers into a new layer on top and then opened that layer up in Camera Raw. There, I loaded up a preset that I made that has various different levels and values adjustments, as well as adding some film grain. After that, I then added a color lookup adjustment layer, set the blending mode of that layer to color so it doesn't affect the values of my image, and then loaded up a LUT that yielded the color toning that I liked for this image. Guys, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, maybe give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing. By the way, guys, if you want a deeper insight into my editing process, which includes getting your hands on a Photoshop document and joining my Discord, consider joining my Patreon, link down below. And until next time, stay creative.